Everyone, welcome to your visual creativity lecture. I'm just going to go into the full screen. This is your lecture video, so you should watch this before you complete any of the tasks because the content of this is directly related to the task that you're going to do. So it's important you watch this first. So this week's lecture is in the define phase, which I'll explain in a minute, and it's about concept board and keywords, which is something that you are going to do. So let's have a little look at our design process just to see where we are. So our design process: discover, define, develop, deliver, which we've been using this diagram to show that. And we have been in the discover phase for quite a while now, and we're moving on this week to the define phase. So this is an important part of the process. You can't skip it. It's not optional. So very important that you do this and complete this before we move on to the next phase. So discover. So in discover, we've been exploring potential ideas. We've been kind of working experimentally, and we've decided that we're working with this theme patterns, and everything that we've done can fit within that. So define is going to be when you make your concept board and keywords. That is your interpretation of the idea patterns, and it presents to you and to everybody the idea that you're going to work with for your final piece. But it's the beginning of a design development process. So after this, you will develop further ideas and you'll make a final illustration. So define is really when you define your idea or your concept. It's not the final piece. It's simply an interpretation of the theme patterns that you'll then work with in two further stages of the design process. So important to note that. But it is a commitment to an idea. So in the discover phase, what have we been doing? We've been doing some observational drawing. We've been generating ideas using our visual elements and our mixed media. You will have brainstormed some words to or done some mind maps to interpret the theme. We're going to do some visual thinking today on ways to express the idea for patterns before you make your concept board. And also we've been getting a lot of feedback and sharing ideas. So this is important. It's a really key part of how we learn is talking about work, having vocabulary to describe it and getting feedback. How do other people see what we've been doing? So all really important, and that's part of our discover phase. So in define, which is the phase we're moving into now, you choose your interpretation of the theme patterns, and you're going to define your interpretation using a concept board and keywords. So just a reminder, the project theme is patterns. We looked last week at a lecture with some ideas for ways to interpret patterns. We have some visuals here as a reminder. We also did a giant class brainstorm, which we created a mind map together on different ways that we can interpret the theme pattern. Lots of options there, and there are more. So if you haven't seen this lecture, you need to go and have a look at that because it's quite important. And as well as this kind of giant class mind map to get ourselves going, you should have done your own mind map on the theme patterns in your sketchbook. So, it may begin with some of these ideas, but it's going to go a little bit further than that and have your kind of spin on it. So if we remember, a mind map is really, a splurge of ideas on the page, no editing, you just get the ideas down there, and the aim is, how many different ideas for patterns can I think of? That's really the aim of it. So, concept board. What the heck is a concept board? Let's think about this for a little bit. So a concept is an idea, and a concept board is a visual representation of that idea. So a concept board shows your interpretation of the brief patterns, and it's going to help you define the key ideas that will drive your project, and that's important. We're not just making a pretty picture here. We're using this board as a defining point in our design process that we can look back at and say, okay, this is my project, this is what it's about, so that we can keep focused on that as we move throughout. Very important learning point. in creative digital media or any creative subject, how to work to a brief or an idea. And our concept board helps us do that. So why do we need a concept board? It helps you to find the key ideas that will drive your project. It'll help remind you as we move forward of the controlling idea, which is a way of thinking about an idea that focuses your projects and helps you make decisions so that you're not working with every single thing in the universe, but we have this one idea that we want to work with that's going to help us kind of narrow the focus and also inspire our project. So it will help keep a concept board will help keep your project focused on the brief rather than kind of wandering off and reverting back to old habits or doing something else, or so it's quite important in that way. And as well, the concept board is kind of a punctuation point. It allows you to say, right, I've committed to this in my project, and this is my theme, this is my idea, so that you can move on to the next phase, because there's a danger that we kind of are a bit woolly about our commitment, or we don't quite do it, or I'll do that in a minute. So this is a commitment, it helps us move on from our define phase into our discover phase. So let's think a little bit about what a concept is. And we're going to think about the idea of literal versus metaphor. So let's have a look at this image here. So this is a famous artist, Gregory Crutzen, working in photography. So we can think about this image. How might we interpret this? Have a little think for yourself there. So there are lots of ways to interpret something. Two of those ways could be, one, a literal interpretation. So if we look at this image literally, we would say that this woman's home has flooded. However, we can think about it metaphorically. So what would that be if this was a metaphor for something? Because when we look at this, we think, you know what? I don't think that's what the photographer meant. He wasn't just trying to show that someone's home has flooded. He was trying to say something using an image of a woman floating in her own home. So if we were to take a metaphorical interpretation of this, as opposed to the literal one, we would say that this woman is emotionally at sea. She's floating about. She's lost and alone and with no control over her life or direction. So it's this idea that this can be a metaphor. There are other ways to interpret that. But what we're looking for here is just to kind of give you an example of a literal, my home has flooded, to I am emotionally at sea, which is much more metaphorical. So it's that metaphorical interpretation that we're thinking about when we think about, sorry, I'm moving on too quickly, when we think about a concept. So a concept is an idea, and we're thinking of a metaphorical idea as opposed to a literal one. So that's what our concept board will be. So you are going to, in the define phase as well as a concept board, you're going to choose 5 keywords and visually represent them to show your idea. So this is where you're going to begin. So there are other exercises. You will do some doodling. Actually, I may skip ahead to that. Out of what you'll do today, before you get to the concept board and the illustrated keywords, you will do some doodling on ideas, and you will some drawing, some doodling. You'll have done your own mind map, and then you'll choose one before you move on to your concept board and illustrated keywords. So you can have a look at the instruction videos on the doing and the doodling, because that's quite important, so that you have some exploration. So actually, I'm going to put in a slide there before we move on here. So you're going to do some doodling on the and see video on this. Okay. So the very first thing you'll do will be doodling on 3 ideas to explore some ideas for patterns visually. And so the first thing that you should do is see the video on this. Then we are going to, the first thing that we'll do after that is the keywords. So choose 5 keywords and visually represent them to show your idea. So keywords, let's have a look at this. So if you remember the beginning, we did patterns and we did illustrated keywords, and we're going to use those illustrated keywords again. So here are some illustrated keywords, which are words that look like the thing that they say. So this is important because it gives us a word which is, very helpful in defining something, but it also gives us a visual. So it, brings us into a visual language as well as our kind of word language. So here we have some examples where hang has the G hanging off. We have be, bzz, where we have our two little B's for the E's. We have love, which is this kind of exuberant, life-affirming, glowing letters. And then we have clock, where the O is the letter. The O of the letter clock. The word clock. The O of the word clock is a clock. Ta-da. So here we have some more. We have our illustrated keywords. So you are going to do 5 keywords that visually represent your idea. So you can use these as a way to kind of understand what an illustrated keyword is. However, you will choose your 5 keywords for your idea. And the point of those is to pin down and to show your idea. So you're deciding your idea and then you're showing it and developing it through those keywords. So that's one task. And then you'll have your concept board. And so let's have a little look at that. So once you've done your keywords, you'll make a concept board. So here's some examples of concept boards. So have a look at this for a minute, pause the video and write down, what do you think that this concept board is about? What idea is it showing? So have a look at that one. So we might think about how this concept board was about addiction to social media. So this student was trying to visually represent this idea of social media as a drug. They were using pictures here, so photographs. This one, again, what can you see in this concept board? So pause the video and have a little look, think, write some words down. So this is a concept board that is about the idea of nature versus human. And we have this kind of cyborg here. So they were saying, well, it's actually nature meets human. So this student was thinking about how the veins and leaves are growing networks and how wires and computer chips are also networks, and thinking about organic and mechanic people, beings. So this kind of cyborg idea. So making connection between those things. There's a couple of concept boards. So we're going to look now at some concept boards with their keywords. And this is quite useful. So here we have a concept board on the right, which is this visual representation. And then on the left, we have our illustrated keywords. So we have the words are isolation, identity, crisis, illusion, pressure, and metamorphosis. So then we have this visual representation of this person in crisis, having this identity crisis, this sense of illusion that they're not sure who they are, a feeling of pressure, and I suppose there's some hope there at the end that they will kind of come into metamorphosis. So that's one idea. By the way, these were for a different project, so they weren't necessarily related to the idea patterns, and I'm not going to talk about how they relate to patterns. They're just examples of concept boards. This one, so I suppose this has a little bit of a maybe a story idea happening here. So we have our keywords: alien, life source, transport, future, and eyes. Interesting, kind of unexpected word there. So they have this very kind of psychedelic, science fiction looking concept board where they've got lots of patterns going on, the idea of transport, the future, and an alien life source. So this idea that this alien life source has come to the planet as part of the future. They're kind of taking over these transport networks, and obviously their eyes are something to do with their power as well. This one, so we have industry, growth, plant, connect and flow. So this was, I suppose, another idea of this, how the mechanic and organic can connect to each other. The idea of the flows and connections between industry and plant life, and this idea of the heart, the human body, plants and technology all kind of interlinked in these kind of growing, flowing, connected systems. So very interesting there. This one is kind of another, I suppose this is, and students have different approaches and there's different ways to do this. This student really liked a kind of a story narrative idea. So their concept board is very much almost like a page from a storybook. And they had their words are growth, evolution, improve, decay, and time. Interesting. So there's this story where growth and improvement and evolution over time is then leading to decay. So you have this kind of science fiction world where we've got this growth underneath the water, and then there's this almost sense of over improvement in the world, this kind of future here with the machines and the spacecraft. But actually, this is all leading to decay. We've got this kind of being, this in the water here, kind of exploding, which is kind of bridging those two worlds. So these are some examples of some keywords and some concept boards that students have done in the past for a different project. It was not patterns, though some of them could be interpreted through this idea. So that's concept board and illustrated keywords. And in this week's lab, you're going to do a number of tasks. You should have already completed your own mind map for the theme patterns. After that, and it's important that you do all of these in these steps, there's no point in doing your concept board and then going back and doodling 3 ideas or then doing the mind map. You should do these in this order. It's part of the process. We need to work through our design process. So you should have already done your mind map for the theme patterns. You should do some doodling and drawing on 3 ideas from that mind map to get you going, explore and see, which one of these ideas is really sticking with me, which ones can I think of visuals for. And when you've done that, you can look back and say, which one is really working for me here, which one do I feel I can take forward. So you choose that one for your concept. Then you're going to make a concept board and you are going to do your 5 illustrated keywords. Actually, I would say do your illustrated keywords first and then your concept board. It's probably a better order to do it in. So that is an introduction to some examples of this week's tasks and why you're doing them. There are some separate videos which will show you how to go about doing these. It's fairly straightforward, but I will give you some video pointers on where to go with that. Just a reminder, when you're doing these, think about the techniques that we've learned so far in your sketchbook. Blind drawing, left hand, double pen, mixed media. Nobody reverts to grey pencil here. Use your thick and thin lines, your negative space. You can use cutouts and collage, line, point, shape, pattern, texture. We've done now also brainstorming and mind mapping, and we're going to do some visual thinking exercises for our doodling. So I would ask if there's any questions, but you may have to save those for another day, and that's the end of the video. So see the other videos after this.